A lot of people are talking about critical race theory in an educational context right now. There are many reasons for this, including Paul Rossi writing on Barry Weiss's Substack about his experience at a New York prep school. But this is an issue that I have been trying to talk about for years. It's a real issue. So let me just talk a little bit about critical race theory in an educational context. First of all, what is critical race theory? Well, there are some definitions that you can look up. James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose at New Discourses have pretty solid definitions of critical race theory, but I'm going to give you my kind of personal take on it. It was started at law school by Derek Bell and then kind of published by Gene Stefanik and Richard Delgado. And I would say the biggest issue around critical race theory is it's a way to view the world and society through a racial lens. That society is made up in such a way where race is the primary way of categorizing citizens. And certain races are oppressed and other races are the oppressor, with kind of roots in Marxism and postmodernism and things like that. Now, I am hypercritical of critical race theory. I don't think it holds up to any kind of scrutiny, which is part of why you actually can't criticize it. It's like a Kafka trap. Critical race theorist Alison Bailey calls it privilege-preserving epistemic pushback, which basically means any kind of pushback that you give is just because you are trying to preserve your privilege. And yes, that even goes for black women like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Chloe Valdary, Aisha Akambi, etc. Again, there are many things in this theory that don't hold up to scrutiny. But trying to be fair, you absolutely can use this as a thinking exercise. I've read postmodernism. I think it's kind of interesting to think about how there is no objective truth. Well, it's kind of interesting to look at all of society, especially given our crazy history of racism in this country, as everything is about race and oppression and oppressors and things like that. I think it's a fine way to view the world as long as you bring it in with every other way to view the world. It's just a thinking exercise, but that's not what's happening in schools. Look, critical race theory, I have had several people on my podcast. Well, not several, a few. Most people will not come on my podcast. As I said, they won't defend it in any kind of dialogue style. Coleman Hughes famously asked and invited Ibram X. Kendi to have a conversation, said, we'll raise money, we'll donate it to United Negro College Fund, and Ibram X. Kendi said no. You will never see Ibram Kendi or Robin DiAngelo or any of these critical race theorists have a public conversation with someone who disagrees with their ideas. Again, it's written into this ideology that you don't do that. Okay, so I did have Rod Graham, professor at Old Dominion, and Christine Sleater on my podcast, and both of them said essentially what I said, which is it's a way to think. It's not the way to think, it's a way to think. And it was never meant to be mainlined into schools or society or anything like that. But that's exactly what's happening. And part of the reason why is because it's about race, it's about marginalized communities. We all agree that racism is bad. So if you label something anti-racist, how could you ever be against that? What are you, a monster? What's the opposite of being anti-racist? So you're pro-racist? Like, no, but that's part of the trick. It's part of the misdirection type of thing. Getting back to education. My biggest issues about teaching critical race theory in schools is one, that it teaches children that the American system is deeply racist and corrupt. And look, you can view it like that with some legitimacy. You really can. There is enough evidence to show that we are a racist society and deeply corrupt. You can view it through that lens if you would like. I don't think it's the most accurate lens to view it through. I don't think it's a productive lens, but you can. The problem I have is there's so much focus on how terrible it is that is taking up the bandwidth to teach the skills on how to fix it. There is an opportunity cost to focusing so much on explaining how terrible everything is. And what you miss out on is learning the skills to fix it. And I think that is cruel, to teach children that you are being raised in this situation that is deeply, deeply corrupt. And then we will not give you the means or the tools or the specific pathways how to fix it. That's the problem. There is no specific pathway on how to fix this. It's a never-ending thing. Critical race theorists rarely talk about specific policies that they want passed. I think the war on drugs is a perfect example of systemic racism. John Ehrlichman was very upfront that Nixon did it partially to lock up black people, and then you look at the incarceration rates and they go up right after that. It's working. Tupac Shakur said, instead of a war on poverty, they have a war on drugs so the police can bother me. So why aren't critical race theorists pushing really hard for the legalization and regulation of drugs? Because it's not about specific policies. It's not specific. And that leaves kids feeling really hopeless. They have studied how this affects children, and kids leave classes about critical race theory feeling more hopeless. Teaching children to be hopeless? It doesn't get much worse than that. And I know that's not the intention, but that seems to be the result. Also, built into this ideology, what we're doing is we're forcing teachers to punish the very things that we want to happen, like curiosity, thinking critically. These are things that are not allowed within critical race theory. You can't ask questions. You can't give pushback. You can't say, wait a second, this doesn't add up. Wait, what about this? What about that? You can't point out the inconsistencies. Punishing curiosity in school? I can't think of worse things to do. Look, we are a very diverse country, perhaps the most diverse country in human history. You have all these tribes together, and it's hard to maintain all this. The only way we can do it, the only way that heterogeneous groups unite, is by focusing on what you have in common, not where you differ. And critical race theory is all about separation. It's all about how we are different, and it's all about tearing down systems. It is easy to tear things down. It is very difficult to build. Think about how difficult it is to build a home with architects and masons and framers and contractors and painters and all of those things. And then think about how easy it is to tear down a house. You just need 5 people with 5 sledgehammers. I am deeply concerned about critical race theory in American education. And I'm gonna keep screaming this from my platforms. And this is a hill I'm willing to die on. If you disagree and you think critical race theory is good to be in American schools, please, let's have an Instagram Live. Come on my podcast. I am trying. I have reached out to every critical race theory professor I possibly can find. Dozens and dozens of emails, and they won't talk to me. I would love to be proven wrong. But until I am, I want critical race theory out of our schools.